as people are still dealing with or coping or trying to comprehend the revelations coming out of the Jeffrey Epstein files, just the sinister acts they committed, the powerful connections that this all entails from, aristocrats in the United States to powerful interests and lobbies around the world to intelligence agencies to individual countries that are promoting this and covering it up. It is just unimaginable that I don't think people can fully grasp the full knowledge, the full texture of this because of how sinister it gets. But in the back of my mind, as we're diving through Jeffrey Epstein, as we're going through, the files and revealing this information to people, there's always been something in the back of my mind, and that is, what about Canada? Because Canada is no picnic. Canada is no innocent person in this. They have been involved in trafficking. We know about Mark Carney and Diana Fox Carney, his wife, relationship with Ghislaine Maxwell. We know about the Trudeau family scandals. We know that Pierre Elliott Trudeau was complicit in minor solicitation in Belgium through David Rockefeller and the Rockefeller Foundation that extorted minors for trafficking. We know about all that detail, but there's also growing concern about trafficking within our own neighborhoods. So take a look at this. This is from Global News saying a record high calls to human trafficking hotline in Canada have surged in this country, ladies and gentlemen. So, as I said, Canada is no innocent place. It's no picnic. I know we tend to make fun of the United States and poke at their dilemmas, but as you can see here, crime is running amok. And I've said this, that we have to focus on our problems and not be solidified into the psyop that everything wrong in the world has to be related to Donald Trump or, everything is America's fault. Well, we have faults our own that are not being addressed properly, including this. So, according to their article here, it says the Canadian Center to End Human Trafficking says the hotline it operates saw a record high for calls last year. Calls to the Canadian Human Trafficking Hotline hit more than 5,900 calls nationwide in 2025, a 14% increase from 5,100 calls in 2024, the organization said. The organization has been seen a year-over-year rise in calls since its launch in 2019. The majority of calls to the hotline are regarding SEX trafficking accounts, but the hotline is also seeing a steady increase in labor trafficking cases. Labor. And what if we told people that all this temporary foreign workers, the fact that Tim Hortons and Canadian Tire, all these, promote Canadian places, buy Canadian. Remember that? Remember they told you about that? Isn't it interesting that these confirmed Canadian institutions are also going behind your back to lobby the government of Canada to bring temporary foreign workers to replace people that are eligible, Canadian citizens that are eligible to work at these facilities? Isn't that kind of interesting? Is that kind of like trafficking? No one ever describes it that way, because if you describe it as trafficking, then Canadian Tire, Walmart, all these employers would have to be criminally prosecuted, which of course they're not going to do. The center also says that since launching, trafficking incidents were the most frequent documented in largest provinces such as Ontario, which is ranked the highest for 66% of reported trafficking incidences. Alberta saw 11%, British Columbia saw 9%, and Quebec saw 7%. Meanwhile, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, the Atlantic provinces, and the territories saw the lowest rates. According to the organization, traffickers often enter people's lives appearing warm, caring, and supportive, and said once trust is established, it can be weaponized to exert control and enable exploitation. Well, what if people learned about Jeffrey Epstein? Oh, hey, little girl, you want to get a modeling contract? You want to get into a film career? You want to get onto a Disney show or Nickelodeon? Well, I have contracts. I have connections with these institutions and highly regarded people. Why don't you come with me? You give me some massages and we'll talk this over. Same situation, folks. Same situation. Only this time, it's happening closer to home, and this should be alarming to people. This should be the outcry that Canadians should be alarmed to. Of course, obviously, Jeffrey Epstein, powerful figures, that is going to be something that is going to shock the world because it is the most revealing information that we have received in almost a century. Almost a century. But this is just insane that this continues on under our noses within our neighborhoods constantly, and nothing's being really done about this. Here's CTV News saying Canada's facing human trafficking epidemic, says a survivor. That's from November of last year. So someone who survived these trafficking circles, they're saying that Canada is facing an astronomical rate of trafficking. That's not being reported. That's not being done. That's not being, held to contempt by our federal institutions. No one's bringing this to Parliament. Why is this not being regarded in the House of Commons during question period? Why is no one up in arms about this? If we're up in arms about Jeffrey Epstein, and I understand that completely, then shouldn't we be up in arms about this? Because this affects your kids. So here's some more crazy stories that came out with this that, again, don't get the full recognition that it should deserve. So you remember this story? I think we covered it a while back, but I want to just show this again. As Table Salt reminds us, CBC Marketplace exposes a rampant SEX for shelter arrangements in Canada. Trudeau's policies have turned landlords into pimps. So people that are looking for a place to live in the country because of our horrendous policies, because they're being overtaxed, because of the cost of living, inflation, everything in between, these people that are looking for a place to live are being extorted to use their bodies to get rent. Isn't it, I mean, how low can you go? How low can you go to say that in one of the wealthiest nations that we could potentially be, that people have to sell themselves and be sexually exploited just to get rent? Think how crazy that is. Think how backwards that is. That sounds like something in the Dark Ages. That's something you hear in like medieval times that the peasants would have to do. And now it's still happening in 2026. Here's Mark Nixon. So there's this interview. This is from the West Block on Global News. It says, explosive, Canada's border is wide open by ports and trains. Less than 1% of cargo is scanned. 0 train cargo is inspected. No personnel, no equipment, no enforcement. Fentanyl precursor chemicals pouring in from Vancouver's ports. And what did we discover when the BC ports were on strike? That many of the employees that were striking, they're not only striking because of unfair wages and practices, but they're also striking because of this. Because they cannot have confirmation about what's coming into the country. And they heard little screams. They heard voices. They heard humans inside these containers. So why are we not allowed to confirm what products are being brought into the country or being exported out of the country? Why is the ports not allowed to know this information? And why are they not scanning to make sure, for security reasons, for both the port workers and the country itself, why are we not allowed to scan these cargo ships? It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable that we can have border security at crossings on bridges and roadways going in and out of the country, but not the ports, not trains. You would think that they would be highly regarded because of fentanyl, because of what they're talking about here. So let's take a listen to this. This is amazing.
Let's talk about searching equipment, because we talked about people, but I was surprised to learn, and perhaps this makes me very naive, but that the CBSA doesn't have the capacity in terms of officers or technology, for example, to search the vast majority of containers that are coming into the Port of Vancouver. And we know that's a huge fentanyl entry port. Can you talk to us a little bit about what the ability of the CBSA is to seize and investigate, in particular, drugs in Canada when they're coming in?
Yeah, I mean, we do have good intelligence. We work very hard at it. Again, it's simply a matter of more. We need more people. We need more equipment. We search less than 1% of what comes into Canada. Modes like rail.
Less than 1%?
Rail, we don't do at all. We don't look at whatsoever. We don't know what.
So after he just gave a tongue bath on saying how good the intelligence services, how great all the institutions are, yeah, less than 1% of cargo is searched. Less than 1%. That even shocked the host. That even shocked, who was that? Mercedes Stevenson. That shocked the host. Less than 1% of all cargo coming in and out of the country is searched. But the institutions are great, right? We can't, have disrespect for that. Wow. And now you understand why, hey, fentanyl precursor chemicals are pouring in. Hey, maybe they're extorting actual people into the country. But Tim Hortons, McDonald's, Walmarts, and Canadian Tires, and all sorts of these, entry-level jobs that our Canadian youth could be eligible for, they're extorting migrants. They're extorting people who they trafficked into the country without documentation. And this is why I've been saying that what's been going on with ICE in the United States is not exactly the proper way to deal with this matter, because if you want immigration to stop, if you want, stop the migrants from pouring in, you wouldn't be going neighborhood to neighborhood and cracking the heads of people. You'd be going right to the source. You'd be going right to the NGOs. You'd be going right to the employers. You'd be cracking their heads. You'd be criminally prosecuting them for extorting human beings from other countries, other parts of the world for cheap labor and undermining the U.S. economy. You would be extorting, you'd be going after them, not the individual neighborhoods across America. And that's how we know that ICE is not a immigration enforcement. It's a state police. Hence why they're building all these cages, not just for immigrants, not for temporary sending off migrants elsewhere. It's for you. It's for you. They want to go after you. They want to use ICE as their own federal agency, as state police, to go after any American that they so desire. And that's why I've said having ICE here is insane, because you don't think that Mark Carney and the Liberal Party would try to extort the exact same thing after what we saw with the Freedom Convoy, after what we saw with the peaceful protesters. You think Mark Carney's going to go easy on Canadians if we had an ICE agency in this country? Let's hear some more of this.
comes in via train. Again, we don't have the infrastructure, we don't have the people to actually do that work.
I just wanted to ask you to go back on rail. With rail, is that an inability to search just the products coming across, or is that people as well?
Could be either. Could products, people. We don't have the infrastructure to do those searches. There's plans underway to allow us to do that work on the U.S. side because there are ports where they have the infrastructure to do that. But again, that's really...
But what happened to that, multi-billion-dollar investment into security right after, we got scared by Trump's first set of tariffs? What happened to that? Oh, that's right. No one knows. No one knows where that money went to. Did it actually go to investments into security, border crossings? I thought that was supposed to go towards, hiring more CBSA agents. They never said. They never followed up. They never said anything. But they poured in this money, told you it's about security. That's how we got that little break from Donald Trump on the tariffs at the first point. And then nothing happened ever since. Go figure. Here's this. This is just recently from CBC News Alerts. It says more than 200 charges laid in the Greater Toronto Area and Quebec over a large multi-provincial human trafficking ring run by organized crime. York Regional Police say this group was also involved in frauds, drug trafficking, and weapon offenses. More to come. So we see this so frequently in this country. And as you just heard, as they're trying to give a ton bath still to the institutions because they're losing respect, and rightfully so, they're saying that less than 1% of cargo entry is inspected properly. Less than 1%. And they're saying, well, we don't have the resources. We don't have the people. We don't have the manpower. We don't have the ability to actually properly investigate that. Well, shouldn't that be brought up to the federal government? Shouldn't that be brought to Mark Carney's attention? Mr. I'm going to fix Canada. Canada secure. Canada strong. We don't need the United States. Wouldn't you bring that up to the federal government instead of just saying, yeah, we can't check cargo. We can't check the train rails. So whatever comes in could be drugs, could be narcotics, could be people, could be weapons. We don't know. We can't check. Like, how embarrassing that is. How embarrassing and how ignorant it is that these are the same people that talk about how they're in the position of power they are because we need to secure people. We're charging your safety after all. That's why we're going full force on censorship. Because words hurt more than smuggling people or bringing narcotics or weaponry, illegal weaponry. Just how hilarious that all is. So here's Blender News, also brought this up. It says, since Trudeau took office, reports of human trafficking have surged more than 400%. Worse yet, CSIS suspects, that's the intel agency of Canada, suspects the Chinese Communist Party may be compromising evidence on Canadian politicians tied to illegal rings. How high does this corruption go? How high up does this corruption go? Well, here's a little breakdown of this. And this still continues on with Mark Carney. I just want to make that clear. It did not end when Trudeau stepped down. Trudeau's policies did not end when he left office. Mark Carney took over, basically passed the baton on to him, and is making the circumstances worse. So here's Blender News talking about it.
Since Justin Trudeau took office, reports of human trafficking have skyrocketed nearly 400%. This from our so-called feminist leader, whose soft on crime and open border policies have turned Canada into fertile ground for traffickers. Exploiting our asylum system, these criminals ship vulnerable women and children here under the guise of refugee, only to hand them over to trafficking networks waiting to prey on them. Just look at the recent bust in Markham, a mansion serving as an underground casino where criminal rings exploited our lax immigration policies to run a multi-million-dollar operation accusation of illegal gambling and human trafficking. And while traffickers turned Canadian soil into a hunting ground, our politicians seemed more interested in enjoying the party than passing laws that would actually protect these victims. Meanwhile, Trudeau's government has no problem invoking wartime measures to crack down on peaceful protesters, freezing their bank accounts and sending in stormtroopers to silence dissent. Yet they can't be bothered to lift a finger to bring actual traffickers to justice.
I mean, isn't that kind of interesting? Isn't that kind of interesting that the governments have the power to shut down bank accounts of individual Canadians at their will, but it's never the criminals. They never go after the bank accounts of the criminals, and they never go after and pursue actual justice against them. It's always the ordinary Canadian. Oh, you're a 78-year-old that doesn't want to comply with the bank policy of being woke? Okay, shut down your account. Oh, you want to demonstrate that the mandates during COVID were radical and against the Constitution? Okay, cut your bank account. But never actually the people in these circumstances where they're actually involved in illegal activity, like an underground casino in Markham. Like, how insane that is. How insane that is that it just seems like people can't be bothered with this. That we've been psyoped. Majority of the people have been psyoped into this anti-American tirade. Everything focused on Donald Trump, thanks to the mainstream media, thanks to outlets like CBC and CTV and Global. They focus nonstop, but they never talk about what's actually happening under your noses in our part of the world. It's happening right in your backyard, folks. The least I could say is, well, at least they're not involved in cannibalism. That we know of. That's the least I could say. That's like the silver lining of this. Well, they're not involved in spirit cooking that we know of, but it's still the same scenario, still the same conflict of interest. I can't believe that this isn't brought more to attention. Here's some more of this.
Trudeau's brand of leadership is little more than a series of hollow slogans and empty gestures about women's rights, while real action to protect women and children is nowhere to be found. If Trudeau's government put half as much effort into tackling human trafficking as it does into virtue signaling, this epidemic wouldn't be sweeping through our cities. It's time for leaders to abandon the empty platitudes and start protecting the vulnerable from the threats their own policies have unleashed.
And that, sadly, is still continuing with Mark Carney. That's still continuing because our lovely prime minister would rather tour around the world and charge us an extraordinary amount of rate for catering on his own private jet to try to get these trade deals that seem to backfire on us. We did secure a deal with China. We'll see how that goes. I said that, in all circumstances, people do have assumptions with China, but at the same time, China does have something that we can look towards, and we can actually learn from China's prosperity when it comes to economics, when it comes to structures. They're going around the world building infrastructure. They're building business partnerships. That's why they're very liked around the world as compared to the United States that continuously bombs the rest of the world because, hey, if our neighborhoods look like crap, let's make them, the rest of the world, even shittier. I guess that's their philosophy. Nonetheless, how this is not full-on mainstream attention, how people not up in arms about this, how there's not been protests and shutting down streets. We saw protesting going about when it comes to Iran, and when it comes to the protesters being struck down in Iran. You see all the people in Toronto gathering together, shutting down streets to protest Iran. What about this? Where's the 40,000 people to line up in the streets in solidarity to stop trafficking? Because guess what? These trafficking networks involve your kids. They involve your families. It can involve you. So wouldn't you be concerned about this compared to something happened overseas? You can have an opinion on what's happening in foreign affairs, but I think this would be more of a situation that should be more regarded than what's happening in Iran or what's happening with Ukraine or what's happening with anywhere around the world, because it directly involves you, indirectly involves security, and what's happening around the world eventually comes back to us. So now we're dealing with these organized crime syndicates, the ones that we point the finger at other countries and say they're complicit of. Guess what? We're also complicit because we have a corrupted government. We have a corrupted institution. The parliamentary system is massively corrupted and is allowing for this nonstop, And human trafficking is a multi-trillion-dollar industry. People need to understand that. It's a multi-trillion-dollar industry. It's more than drug smuggling. It's more than weapons exchanges. It's more than selling on the black market. And that's why these powerful figures, these powerful entities, engage in this. And notice how, in all these circumstances, when it comes to human trafficking, when it comes to these circles, no one brings up the fact that, hey, Mark Weissman, the guy from the Century Initiative NGO program that him and Mark Carney were both running, and now Mark Weissman is a part of Carney's cabinet, are involved in stuff like this. They're involved in trafficking. Because why else would you go and demand in a town hall forum that, hey, we need to bring in more people because we got to boost the population of Canada to 100 million people by the end of the century. By the end of the century. And how Mark Weissman deliberately said that we don't need checks and balances. That's a trafficker. That's a trafficker. But of course, no one's going to put charges on that. No one's going to go after Tim Hortons for illegally lobbying to have open borders, to illegally get and smuggle in cheap labor to work at their facilities so they can undermine more Canadians who are desperate for work. They're never going to go after those people, but they're going to go after you for pointing it out. They're going to go after people like you because apparently it's hate speech to point out that there's organized crime syndicates running amok in your neighborhoods. Apparently it's cyberbullying. It's harassment. That's why we got to silence people. That's why we can't be influenced by podcasters and people on X or Rumble or any of the other outlets that they're trying to demonize. Just crazy.